Justice Oversight Council. Appreciate everyone's attendance. I know we've got a few folks or a couple of folks attending from God's country. Steve's got a heck of a court schedule today, and I think Judge Adams was going to appear remotely, but I don't see him yet. Okay. Glad to have you all. Is it? Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
It's not on the KET guys giving me a head shake here, so test it.
Should I talk now with the talking symbol? Really? How's this? Wow. All right. Well, it only took 11 years for me to figure that out. Welcome, everyone, to the Juvenile Justice Oversight Council. Now that I've learned how to use a microphone, glad to have you all, and glad to have folks from Western Kentucky appearing remotely. Members, if there's ever a need for that, please feel free to reach out to Matt or to me. Shoot me an email or something if you need to zoom in on a meeting because you can't find a deputy to send or you're out of town, out of state, whatever. Please, we'll try to accommodate that anytime we can. With that, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Adams, Miss Gardner, Mr. Gold,
Here.
Miss Walker, Mr. Ward, Miss Comstock,
This is Rachel Bingham here for Director Comstock.
Miss Dennis,
Here.
Dr. Glass, Miss Harvey,
Sorry, Christine Weeder here for Dr. Glass.
Miss Harvey,
Is that me? I'm
Mr. Harvey.
I'm not a miss,
I apologize.
but I don't mind the anonymity. That's okay.
Secretary, my law school acceptance letter was addressed to Miss Whitney Westerfield.
Dr. Marks,
Present.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
Miss Reed,
Here.
Senator Carroll, here. Senator Webb, Representative Bratcher,
Here.
Representative Herron, here. Co-Chair Westerfield,
Here.
Co-Chair Elliott.
All right. Seeing that we have a quorum and we are authorized to do business, we do need to approve a couple of rounds of meetings minutes, which are in your folders, members. We've got the May meeting and then our joint meeting that we shared in June with the Commission on Race and Access to Opportunity. Unless there are objections, I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve these minutes. We'll do them as a group unless there's a problem with that. Rachel?
My only request is that there's just a change, Rachel Bingham for Katie Comstock and the attendees on the June 20th.
Got it.
Thank you. And I'll make a motion after that change has been made.
Thank you. Got a motion from Rachel Bingham, a second from Chairman Elliott, as amended on that June minutes to reflect that change. Any discussion, question? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving both minutes with the amendment that was made, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you. All right. Agency updates. Anybody want to speak or share on behalf of the agency? Obviously, we're going to hear from DJJ here in just a minute, but anybody else want to share on behalf of your agency, how things are going, any issues you're running into? Fair enough. All right. DJJ staff, come on down again. Miss Rebecca Norton and Miss Marissa Ritter. Appreciate you all making time again today. Yesterday they were kind enough, along with Mr. Moore, to speak on the status of DJJ's staffing and how things have progressed since session. I wanted to make sure that this group had an opportunity to hear that and weigh in. So the legislators here have heard that. Everybody else hadn't. So I appreciate you all being willing to make the presentation a second time. You have the floor.
So good morning. We are here today to give an update on the staffing and hiring for the Department of Juvenile Justice. With all the efforts to date, we have seen our correctional officer numbers in our 8 detention centers increase from 146 in January to 183. The additional funding provided in Senate Bill 162 was to add another 146 positions in the Correctional Officer Series to meet the department's recommended staffing to ensure the safety of our youth and all of our staff. Just as important, we've seen candidates on our registers grow significantly. We currently have 325 candidates applying to all of our correctional officer registers. With these numbers, the facilities are able to ensure they are hiring the best candidates. Once hired, the employees are required to attend a 6 weeks academy before they are able to work with our offenders. Although we have seen significant staffing improvements, we still have areas that have a long way to go. In our more urban areas where competition is greater, recruitment and retention is still an ongoing issue. For instance, in Campbell County, we've seen a growth in correctional officers from 2 in February to 14. However, we still have a significantly amount of vacancies in that area. Similar in Jefferson County, we've seen correctional officer numbers nearly double from 6 to 11, but again, we still have a significant amount of vacancies as well. The cabinet and the department have spoken before the legislature several times now about the staffing crisis that DJJ has been facing, primarily on the detention side. However, issues with recruitment and retention staff are felt throughout the system. Conditions at the facility have impacted staffing, especially as our violent incidents have increased. Limited staffing ultimately hurts security, programming, and recreational time for our youth. These burdens also impact our recruitment and retention efforts. Detention staff have long faced poor compensation and pension options, as well as difficult and dangerous work environments. Cabinet and department leaders have talked about how, as recently as 2 years ago, the starting pay for a correctional officer at a juvenile detention center was only $30,000. These low wages did not attract the staff that the department needed. The administration and the cabinet have committed every resource to improving recruitment and retention, and I'd like to give you a short historical summary of the efforts that we have taken on staffing for DJJ. So in August of 2019, the difficulties of hiring and retaining youth workers in the detention facilities was recognized, and salary was obvious the reason. So we implemented a $30,000 special entrance rate. In December of 2021, the pay grade for youth workers was changed from a 9 to a 10, and Governor Beshear increased all current employee salaries by 10% in that series. In July of 2022, the enacted budget provided an 8% increase for all state employees, which also included DJJ employees. However, we still did not see a significant staffing improvement in the detention centers. So in October of 2022, the youth worker starting salary was increased to just over $44,000. This February, we reallocated the positions in the youth worker series in the detention centers to the correctional officer series to more appropriately align with their job duties. In addition, Governor Beshear raised the starting salaries to $50,000 for the DJJ correctional officers. This was achieved by increasing the salary to 5% below the midpoint of the grade and then implementing a $5.23 an hour locality premium. The legislature recognized the importance of this step, and it appropriated $3.2 million to sustain the salary increases in the 2023 legislative session. I also believe it's important to recognize that the legislature also provided $30 million to fund the administrator's request to raise the salary for all DOC correctional officers, and we are already seeing the positive impacts of that investment. The General Assembly also provided $4.8 million to increase the salaries for DJJ staff that are not correctional officers. So just to reiterate there, 2 years ago, the starting pay for juvenile detention centers was only $30,000. Today, we are recruiting correctional officers at 5% below the midpoint, plus that locality premium, which is bringing the new starting pay to $50,000. During the 2020 legislative session, the recruitment branch was established for the cabinet, and we have 3 employees, including myself. And we are dedicated to the recruitment for the entire cabinet. We are actively recruiting for all positions in DJJ with a heavy emphasis on the detention centers. Because we are a small branch, we also depend on our superintendents and their employees to assist in our efforts, and they have been very helpful to us. I'd also like to take a moment to highlight just a few of our recruitment efforts and some of the things that we have done here. So we have contracted with Red 7E, which is a Louisville-based advertising marketing company. We currently have a contract for social media-sponsored advertising, Google search engine marketing, and website advertising. We have held job fairs at the Campbell County and Jefferson County Juvenile Detention Centers. We have attended over 30 job fairs this year, including fairs at Northern Kentucky University, University of Louisville, and regional job fairs in the Louisville and Cincinnati areas. We have increased our department's social media presence. We have ensured our vacant positions are posted on Indeed, LinkedIn, Kentucky Career Center, and Glassdoor. In addition to our efforts, the Personnel Cabinet recognized as the job market changed, agencies need to fill positions faster. And with that in mind, they worked with the legislator to change 18A to allow more flexibility on how long positions are posted. Job advertisements can now be posted for as little as 5 days. Previously, it was 10 days. In addition to the efforts that I've reviewed, Senate Bill 162 also provided the department with other tools to assist in hiring and retaining employees. The bill directed DJJ to develop a limited duration program to allow employees who have resigned to return to their previous employment classification. Letters were sent to eligible individuals, and the reinstatement program provided us with 10 experienced correctional officers that were able to start immediately. Senate Bill 162 also directed DJJ to create a Youth Worker R program, which we modeled after the Kentucky State Police Trooper R program. And lastly, the previous mentioned $4.8 million allocated to increase salaries for positions other than correctional officers. These additional job titles included the Youth Worker Series, Social Service Clinician 2s, IT position, fiscal managers, nurses, psychologists, maintenance positions, and our food service workers. With all these efforts, we are beginning to see a positive signs from the investments made over the past 2 years. And there's no doubt that raising the pay and improving the safety and operations has impacted recruitment and retention efforts. However, it should be noted that based on security examination, more employees were needed in each detention center to ensure the safety of our youth and all of our staff. At the administration's request, the General Assembly appropriated $9.7 million for an additional 146 additional DJJ detention staff. Qualified and competent staff as well as fully staffed facilities are essential to ensuring a secure and well-functioning juvenile justice system for our youth. And I'd like to close by saying that although we are seeing a positive signs in our hiring, we realize that we cannot become complacent in our efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Ritter. I'm going to pose a couple of questions I asked yesterday, and I'm hoping, Ms. Norton, you have an answer to my question from yesterday regarding the pay scale of your community side staff. You spoke yesterday of what we already knew, that their salaries aren't as high as your corrections staff now is. I asked if you all wanted to raise that up, and the answer was a bit reluctant, but eventually Mr. Moore said yes, and I asked for how much that would cost. Do we have a number for that today?
Well, I do want to make sure that I'm giving you the right number. So we were planning to send this as, an answer with a question for clarification. So if I could ask the question for clarification. Okay. Referring to community, on our side, as far as the structure of the agency, we have a community, I'm going to mess up the title of what it's called, community and section. But it's primarily composed of your social workers, social service clinicians, your psychiatrists. Those positions are what make up that grouping. Was there any other position that you were wanting us to include that maybe
outside
of
administration? I mean, everyone not in the corrections side of the agency.
Okay, so in the just basically any non-correctional title. Okay. So we will definitely have to go back and revise that. We interpreted it as that community section with a focus on
If you want to, you can give us
those.
both.
Okay.
What just that community side is, and then what the whole pot is that's non-corrections. I'd be
Okay.
happy with both of those. And the more information you give us, the better our budget can be, or the better I'm armed to ask for it in the budget, since I'm just one out of 138 votes for it. So thank you for that. And then I want to say yesterday, the objective, Mr. Moore said you're trying to get to 307. Is that right, on the correction side?
I believe that's what he said, yes.
Yes, sir.
And you're
that's
at
correct.
186?
183.
I'm sorry, 183. Does the 183 include the 10 you just mentioned you hired, or does it include folks that are in the pipeline now that you've hired and brought on?
I don't believe that includes the people that are
Okay.
in the pipeline, that they're still in that approval process, but I could be wrong about that, but I don't believe it does.
And again, and I know we're covering plowed ground here for those of us who were in judiciary yesterday, but for the benefit of the rest of the JJOC, I asked, because you all had testified, or the secretary had testified previously, and the commissioner before the judiciary committee in the interim, about the struggles that the cabinet has had in terms of using job fairs and social media and the like. And I asked you yesterday about that. Would you tell us how successful that has been this go around? You're investing some number of dollars with the company that you mentioned in those same sorts of.
We are, yeah. We're really excited about our Red 7E. You know, they're doing lots of advertising on social media, Facebook, Instagram. We've really picked up on our Facebook page here for DJJ, and then also as LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn recruiter licensure now for DJJ, where we can actively go in and look for people and go through their profiles and send them personalized messages to try to get them to come, talk to them, give them additional information. We're going to job fairs. We're trying to not only concentrate on our colleges and universities, but going to some of those regional job fairs. We've been going to some nationwide, Superior, and Job News job fairs, and we have a lot of success. We have a lot of interest in people coming to talking to us in those as well. So we're hopeful that our efforts in that area is really going to help us.
And the last question I'll ask, or the request that I'll make before I go to Representative Bratcher, I asked yesterday about your staff ratios at each facility. I want to make sure that you provide that to this committee as well as judiciary. Yesterday, folks, I asked for, and I realized that staff ratio depends on a snapshot population count or census count on a given day and a given moment. I wanted to know what, at that moment, each one of the facilities in the network of facilities that Kentucky has today, what the staffing ratio looks like. Secretary has come in 2 prior years and talked about how the staff ratio is not where everybody wants it to be. We've given you a boatload of money that you needed, and not just for DJJ, but for DOC as well. But I want to know how we're progressing. And my request when I asked you all to come and appear before these committees, and I assume it was communicated to you all, I wanted you to know that this is sort of almost going to be a monthly affair. I'd like to keep close tabs on how we're progressing. Good news or bad news, I want to know how we're doing at DJJ. Representative Bratcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions, just so I understand, because I get asked these questions out there, and sometimes I talk myself into a circle. So let's say that somebody in DJJ was making $34,000 a year. They will immediately or soon will go to $50,000. Is that the way it works?
All the grade changes and all the extra money have been given to the correctional officers, and we are bringing them in at $50,000. Yes.
Now, this is for ones that are currently working plus ones that are coming in.
Yes, sir.
If they were 34, they're 50 now.
Yes, sir.
Now, what if somebody was at 55,000? They don't see any change, right? Right.
Correct. So I think those were not, they weren't adjusted in accordance with all of the other correctional officer adjustments.
And then also, if I might, Mr. Chair,
Please, at your leisure.
You said something about 10 were added. Was that for like the Mirrored Trooper R program? Is that what you meant by that?
No, that was the program that they created to contact the employees who have resigned. and who were eligible after being resigned to be able to come back. So they sent letters to everyone that was eligible, and out of all those letters, we got responses from 10 that we were able to hire back.
The Trooper R program it's not really had time to get started, right? Has it?
That is my understanding.
And I don't guess you have any predictions on that. How many retirees are out there that you're going to send letters to them? Is that what it is, or you've already sent letters?
She's saying I believe they have already sent the letters, but I don't have the numbers with me today of how many or anything like that.
Okay, great. Really, really happy to see the numbers are picking up. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, Secretary.
One small clarification to the representative's question. I think you asked about the hypothetical 54,000.
Is your mic on?
Yes, I'm probably not close enough to it.
There we go. Thank you.
The hypothetical $54,000 employee, you all correct me if I'm wrong, but that employee would have received the 6% increment that all state employees received. The folks, yes, and the folks that got the bump up to 50 did not receive that 6%. So, I got that right, didn't I?
Yes, yes.
So it's not like they wouldn't have received anything. They would have got the 6%. So,
Thank you, Secretary. Chairman Elliott.
Good morning, and thank you for your, I think this is on, thank you for your presentation. What is the average salary of the staff that's on the community side? I know you said that the average on the correctional side was 34 prior to the increase to 50. Do you have a number on the community side?
On the community side, are you referring to youth workers or social workers?
All the above,
all of them?
or both of them.
Okay. We did just look up to see. So the social service worker ones, which is when you're thinking of that series, sort of the entry level for those, they're being brought in just a little bit over 45, and then after 6 months they receive 5% on that. For the most part, they are moving up through that series. There's a social service worker 2, there's social service clinician, so they're moving up that graded pay scale, but that on the social service side is probably the lowest grade salary position. It's also the lowest graded position. And then for youth workers, I'm sorry, I know you just had it in front of me. For youth workers, I believe after probation, they are just slightly below midpoint of the grade. There's probably some math rounding in there. So they're just below midpoint after that probationary period. So they're being brought in at that 5% below midpoint. After their 6 months probation, they're being moved up to midpoint of the grade.
And what is the midpoint of the grade?
It is $3,423 per month, which I don't have my better sheet in front of me.
Has there been any discussion about increasing their pay as well, or?
So we're there at midpoint of the grade.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty restricted on what we could do to do any increases for that. Of course, if there is extremely low staffing in any of those areas or facilities, we could potentially address trying to fill those vacancies with a locality premium or something along those lines. But being at midpoint of the grade, that is sort of the upper limit of where we can hire them in.
Can I ask a dumb question? Can you not change the grade?
I don't. So I want to say in 2019, the youth worker series went through the regrading process, and those were moved from a grade 9 to a 10. What I can tell you is that in that youth worker series, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong from the HR side, that they are, typically they go from youth worker 1 to youth worker 2 after a year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I don't have the years with me, but yeah, there's a kind of a step ladder.
Who decides whether to change the grade of a particular position?
That'd be the person. We'd have to work with the personnel cabinet to do that.
Okay.
And if I could clarify.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner?
Yes, they come in at youth worker 1 and they are on probation. As soon as they're off probation, they automatically become a youth worker 2.
That's 6 months.
It's a year.
Thank you.
So, if you have that, did that limitation not also exist for the correction side, folks?
So with the correctional officer series, those job titles are at midpoint of their grade, and then they're receiving that additional.
They are now?
The correctional officers are at midpoint of.
Yeah, we're bringing them in at 5% below midpoint. So once they come off probation, they're at midpoint of the
At
grade.
so the $50,000, they were that far beneath?
No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase my answer. So the correctional officers series, they are brought in at 5% below midpoint, but then there's that locality premium where those facilities are understaffed that we're able to utilize. That's that additional $5.23 per hour. When you look at the base salary plus that locality, that is what's getting you to that $50,000 at the correctional officer entry level.
So their grade, position grade, hadn't been changed in this whole process on the correction side?
I'm sure. I'm certain that the personnel cabinet has looked at that, but through their processing to assign grades, I believe that the job title is appropriately graded.
But I mean, has it changed, say, in the last 9 months?
I'm not aware of that. No,
Okay.
I do not know that.
It's not a no or a yes. You're just not sure.
I'm just not sure. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I guess one follow-up,
Yeah,
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman. Is there a deficiency amongst the staff numbers for youth workers? I know that we have, 183 corrections staff, and we want to get to 307. What are the numbers on the youth worker side, if you know?
I do not have the youth worker numbers with me, but we could certainly get that for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to hit on the locality and where we are with that now and how that's being utilized and what locations, and if anybody is being transferred from one facility to another to fill in those gaps.
So the locality premium applies to all of the detention facilities. So those 8 detention, where essentially all of our correctional officers are working, are in the detention facilities, and it applies to all of them.
But who's getting more money? I mean, where's that located? I mean, is it across the board, or is it just certain detention centers?
No, it's across the board in all of our detention centers.
Okay, so nobody's not getting that right now.
On the correctional officers, yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marks.
Thank you. Remarkable work. I'm just so impressed and taking copious notes. I'm interested, do you have metrics on improved retention right now, or is it too early to tell? We're mostly talking about recruitment, but interested in retention.
Rodney, who was here with us yesterday, I know that he's working on those numbers. It is a very short time period that we have right now with these increased salaries. So I know he was going to do sort of a historical look back on retention and then at least be able to provide some numbers as far as what we've seen so far in the most recent period.
And Advocate Preston.
Thank you. Good morning. A couple of questions. So on the worker R, I'm not familiar. I know the term trooper R, but I've never really known what that means. What are the benefits of this R series of bringing back retired workers? Because, I mean, we can hire retired workers at any point. There's pension implications, but what are the benefits of that program specifically?
Do you have more of the...
We can definitely ask for more detail. My understanding is when KSP utilizes Trooper Rs, is it's beneficial to both the agency and the trooper as far as their retirement is concerned, for them to come back essentially on a contract basis, as opposed to being, sort of full-time state employees, so to speak. So on the KSP side, I believe that's why they use it, and then on the DJJ side, we've framed it the same way, so if it's beneficial to those who are retired and want to come back, it would be an option for them to join us that way.
Okay. And if it's a contract that tells me probably your compensation options are more, you're not bound by personnel regulations as much if they're coming back in that.
I'm not sure what job title we're bringing them back at.
Right. I don't want to say that I know the amount that's on there, but we can certainly get that for you.
All right. Thanks. One more question. So yesterday at Judiciary, the topic was kind of where kids are being placed, and we don't need to go over all that ground again. But today, in talking about staffing, it occurs to me that the tough position that DJJ is in as far as where to place these kids in compliance with all the statutory requirements, that staffing has to be an aggravator of that if you don't have enough workers. It's impossible for you to give an exact answer here, but if you could just comment on it. If you had full staffing, but your existing brick and mortar structures, would you have more ability to place kids regionally than you do now? I've got to think your problems now are a combination of your brick and mortar structures and not having enough staff to be in. If we solve the staffing issue, how far would that go to solving the placement issue?
I don't want to give you anything definitive, but I do agree that it is likely a combination of both. I don't know that it is a combination of both in every facility. It could be that certain facilities with possibly higher populations may struggle more than other facilities that would have lower populations. But what I can tell you is that through Senate Bill 162, there was allocated the $1.75 million for us to be able to hire a consultant who has expertise in design and build of juvenile facilities. And we are working with them to do a survey of all of the detention centers, as well as take into account our population and projected population of youth, and really have them give us their take on what is the best practice as far as safety is concerned. If we are to, house various levels of youth or genders of youth in one facility, and really make recommendations as to how we can accomplish that. And so we're definitely working with them on an almost daily basis, and we hope to have something very soon that can give us a better sense of how much the facilities impact that return to regional.
Could I add something to that, Mr. Chairman? I don't want to go too far down this road because this is not the topic that they were asked to speak on. But when you talk about, regionalization, I think that term gets used loosely a lot. These days it should probably
it certainly
be used
means different things to different
artfully.
people.
And if you're talking about regionalization under the old system that existed for the first 25 years of the detention system, that's one thing. If you're talking about regionalization under Senate Bill 162, that contemplates really quite a different system. And that's what Ms. Norton was saying. We're studying how we can implement that now. And at least in my mind, I don't think we know at this point what a full staffing component might look like under the Senate Bill 162 model. That's something that we have to study. Because it will, when you're separating within a single detention center 4 populations, that will necessarily have an impact on how you staff each of those units. So I don't think we're at the point where, when we talk about full staffing, we don't really know what that will be under a fully implemented Senate Bill 162 model, in my judgment. But we're working on it to figure all that out. It is a complicated equation, but we're trying to develop that. So when the question talks about full staffing, full staffing, has it existed under what we're doing now or what we were doing a year ago is one thing, but under what we're moving toward with Senate Bill 162, full staffing may mean something different.
Did you have any other questions, Damon? Okay. I do have a question, Secretary, if I can. It was brought up yesterday, or ladies, if you know the answer to the question, the Corn Ferry study that Chairman Petrie referenced yesterday. I've heard that talked about a number of times. He and I have had conversations about it, and he mentioned that he spoke yesterday in committee about how it was due in September of 21, and we're rolling up on August of 23. Can someone say what we're waiting on exactly?
I don't think we could comment on that. That would be a personnel cabinet question.
Is the contract with personnel and not with justice?
Correct.
I believe that to be the case. And when you say, is that what we're waiting on, I want to make sure I understand What the import of your question? Because I mean, you mean in terms of developing the staffing we need?
No, well, as Chairman Petrie talked about yesterday, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but as I understand it, as this chair understands it, that can change the pay scale,
right?
Which is going to fundamentally and substantially change all the numbers. And even the funds that we spent this session for the Justice Cabinet, where those positions are today is going to be different based on what that study says they need to be adjusted for whatever. And that it's going to change the math, or not change the math, but change the solutions. It's hard for us legislators to budget when the goalpost is moving, or if we know it's going to move and we expected it to move 2 years ago and it still hasn't moved, and it'd be helpful to know. And so I was just curious what we're waiting on. We being the government of the Commonwealth of Kentucky in this study that was due 2 years ago.
I think we would have to defer to the personnel cabinet on that. I think
Fair
that's
enough.
where that work is taking place.
Fair enough.
Yes. Okay.
That will be who I bring in next month. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Going forward, unless Chairman Elliott or I wish to have you all come back in and give a more detailed report, I think I'm okay with some sort of written report. You're not paying attention to this agenda on a regular basis, I'm sure, but we have a spot for agency updates on every one of these agendas. And AOC, to my dismay, AOC thankfully is the one agency that every single time consistently provides a report on implementation of Senate Bill 200, and it's always in the folders. It could be in that format if DJJ would like to do it that way. Or you can have somebody come in and tell us what the numbers are. I'll leave it up to you, but I'm okay with just a written report. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Before we go to YAP, the Youth Advocate Programs, I wanted to dive into one such agency report, the only one that we consistently get. And I want to give kudos to the awesome team at AOC for always faithfully providing this report. Rachel, you get the bullets here on my questions because Katie decided I was going to pick on her for missing the meeting, but I know where she is, and that's fine. We're glad to have her on board at AOC and look forward to having her before as part of the council going forward. I wanted to highlight something. This group, you all, have talked about issues and concerns that have been brought up with regard to the fair teams on occasion. One of those, perhaps the most outstanding issue I've heard talk about, is the attendance and tracking of attendance. Your report here that you have in your folders, members, from AOC, if you look at the third bullet there on the first page at the bottom, that second bunch of arrows, the third one down, Department for Family Juvenile Services has developed a method to track that attendance, and there's actually a chart on the flip side when you turn the page that shows that attendance for 2023. I guess I want to ask, and Rachel, I said this is a question for AOC, but it might be a question for Steve on behalf of county attorneys. Not that he's prepared to speak on behalf of all of them everywhere across the Commonwealth, or Damon, or our law enforcement member, and I don't know that person is here today. But the attendance is obviously not great in those three categories, and I'm hoping there can be some explanation as to why. Anybody want to volunteer? Yeah, Damon.
Yeah. So this is new information, so I'll answer on the fly. Sure. I do notice that the reference at the bottom that DPA and law enforcement have increased in attendance, so I'm very happy to see that.
Fair point. It does say that.
But increase to that low number is a mixed blessing at best. I'll say two things. Number one is I'm going to find out more as to why our people aren't participating. But what I've heard firsthand from our people when this topic is generally discussed is that when our staffing levels are suffering, and an attorney that should have, or an office that should have 10 attorneys has 7 attorneys. Things like fair team, drug court,
That's the
mental
first to
health
go.
court, those are the first to go because there's no one whose liberty is at stake at that moment.
And if I can go to bat for you, Damon, this group also didn't get the benefit of the very real situations your staff are facing that was brought up yesterday as well with regard to the reg that we discussed.
Right.
You might highlight for the benefit of this group just one such fact pattern. You talked about, or Scott talked about, was it a Jefferson County prosecutor that's got 44 clients from Boyd County to wherever else?
I think there were 44. Yeah, it was a Jefferson County public defender that has 44 juvenile clients in a DARE. But then other clients, other clients in 6 different facilities. And so one attorney in Jefferson County has clients in 7 different facilities. So it's literally impossible for them to visit all their clients and do their job.
I appreciate you checking out or digging into that further.
Sure.
But that's a honest-to-goodness predicament that the DPA is having to deal with. Steve, do you have any feedback on county attorney attendance rates? And I don't know if you have the benefit of the chart here that Rachel has provided, but it shows, and I guess this is current through when, Rachel? It's 2023 attendance rates, but is it through June, July to date?
It's through mid-July.
Thank you. So right now, county attorneys are at a 50.5% attendance rate. Any thoughts on that? Or and if you don't, just like Damon, you're getting it cold. Feel free to defer and ask the association or some of your colleagues about that and report back to us.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I've not had an opportunity to review that. So thank you for the opportunity to go back and talk about that. This has been an issue that we have discussed at all of our training and have stressed over and over about the importance of attendance and how that is being tracked, and how working with the FAIR team in a collaborative way is a very important thing. I would say similar to Mr. Preston that
right.
It's when you're dealing with the volume that both the prosecution and defense are, sometimes
You're in the
there's
same boat.
triage that's involved. But it is a duty. It's a statutory duty, and it's one that we need to be able to meet. Sometimes that takes additional resources, but we are making it a point of emphasis and making sure that everybody is aware that they need to be attending those.
I appreciate that. Here's what I propose. I'd ask both of you gentlemen to do what you're willing to do here and go back to your groups and your folks and your staff and talk about that, and feel free to report back. I want you to report back whatever your findings are. I'm going to reach out to Sheriff Ward, our law enforcement representative here on the council, to ask him to do the same thing on behalf of the law enforcement voices on these councils, or on the FAIR teams rather, at the lowest rate at 23.7%. But I'd also ask DCBS, CHFS, and the REACTs to go back to their shops. They're at just shy of 70%, so not quite 3/4 of the time. But they're the next worst bunch here in the chart, as folks see. I think it's worth revisiting that next month if you all can come back and tell us if there's something else we need to do to improve upon that. 100% is not realistic across the board for every single role, but it ought to be a lot closer to 100%. Okay, the next question I had was really just a data accuracy question. You guys might want to answer this instead of Rachel, but I'm sure Rachel is capable here. The racial disparity charts there, and that's a chart we've seen often, but there are no dates. I don't know what the range on this is on the top of the third page there, or the, I guess, third front and back page, but the second page, just above the House Bill 3 information. Thank you for that. And then there's one other question. back on the first page, talking about the number of complaints and the fair teams, the referrals there, we've got 21, 2, and 3 numbers, and 23 looks to be maybe more than twice as big. Well, maybe, I don't know, but certainly on track to beat 22. How does this compare to pre-pandemic? Are we at pre-pandemic levels already? Are we, because I don't know what 19 looked like.
No, but we can give you the chart. One of the things that we want to be really intentional about too is the fact that 20 and 21 are outliers.
They are weird years.
Yeah, and so we have actually all the way back to 2015
Sure.
implementation. So what we'll do is we'll actually take that data contact point and just have it as a reoccurring chart like the others.
Thank you.
And then that way you'll have the projection.
I appreciate that. Anybody else have any other questions about AOC's report? Or anything?
I do.
Yeah, Representative.
So when House Bill 3 was initiated or began, it was 30 days that the fair teams had to react. And it ended up being 90. And I don't know who it was. Somebody in this room, I'm sure, thought it would be better to go from 30 to 90. I have 2 questions. One is the attendance record the reason that was expanded to 90? Because nobody's showing up to these things?
No, you talking about that fair team, the change there in House Bill 3?
Yeah.
The 90 was the number I came up with because the number that I believe Josh Crawford had originally proposed was a 30-day time limit. Steve Gold had talked about there being some limitation on, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Steve, so you tell me if I'm wrong, but there was a limit that some fair teams weren't acting fast enough. 30 days was the proposed number, and I thought 30 days was pretty short for some fair teams, and so I suggested 90 as a alternative, and that's what made it in.
So there's no correlation to this dismal attendance that some of these participants have on fair teams?
In fairness, I think the attendance problems predate that change in House Bill 3 by quite a bit.
Well, before there was no...
But before 22, we weren't tracking it. I don't think. Yes, ma'am.
So for prior to, we have been able to have some idea of attendance and a manual tracking, and have talked in previous years with DCBS and DPA and the partners about increasing attendance. We shared it with the state interagency council, but we formalized that process to really be able to show the full picture. So we've had general conversations, but not anything this specific to be able to guide.
Okay.
You know when it started in 22, this data we're looking at?
To be honest, Senator, I would go back a little bit farther on us presenting to the state interagency council on just general information on probably 2017-18. But then to formalize it, what would you say, Todd?
Oh, okay. So you manually added in the... Nice. Thanks. Senator Carroll, or I'm sorry, Representative, were you done? Yeah. Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commenting from the law enforcement perspective, has there been any contact or any unified voice from law enforcement about this entire process? I would venture to say that there is a frustration with this whole process and that many in law enforcement do not buy into it because of the increased issues that they're seeing in our school systems. And in the beginning, was there a voice, a clear voice being heard from the law enforcement community, or do you think that might be part of the issue?
I guarantee it's part of the issue since the enactment of the bill. They were absolutely included and involved in Senate Bill 200 drafting and writing the bill. Law enforcement, municipal, county, and otherwise, maybe even the state police. They were included in the drafting of the bill. But I can tell you, because I've sat in this co-chair spot since this council was created, the law enforcement representative has gone months at a time. For the first few years, that particular individual went months and months and months, maybe sat through the entire 2 or 3 years that person was on the council, and I only ever heard him speak once. And that may have been answering the role. I mean, it sounds silly, but they never participated, never spoke up, never offered a report. To my knowledge, weren't communicating with any other law enforcement groups or organizations or associations. I don't want to throw Sheriff Ward under the bus. I have no idea whether or not that's happening now. In the defense of whoever that person is, that person may or may not have contacts to those associations. They may have to start and create those contacts. Unlike agency heads that are here, you're the boss of your agencies, or you're higher up enough in your agencies you can communicate. That's more of a spread out association. So that's a harder job. I don't know that it's happening. So I think that certainly has a part in it.
I just know from the communications that I have that there's just an overall juvenile crime and a perception of a lack of accountability and especially within those that are working as school resource officers. So, for what it's worth.
I think it's worth bringing. Yes, ma'am.
If we have participation on the fair team of the law enforcement with the percentage that you see, Senator Carroll, they are, I can just about guarantee, highly active law enforcement. So when we get them at the table, they are vital. They have helped with being able to do home visits and wellness checks with our kids. They know the kids better than most because they're, as you said, the school resource officers. Any way that we as a council or we as a fair team or as, the CDW program can work to do that, we are definitely at the table. When we get them there, they are amazing to have. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Jim.
It might be worthwhile to bring some of the statewide associations in, just to invite them to this council, even if they don't have a seat on it. I'll do that, Senator. Thank you. Yes, Damon.
Can I just ask some mechanical question, maybe of Rachel or others that know? So in local fair teams, my office sends our representative, but how is the law enforcement representative selected? Does the team select someone, and does that person always know you're the person you're expected to be here?
Yeah. So the team is the entity that decides, and we have been very intentional to providing a facilitating, coordinating role, but the team run the team. And so they are the ones that decide who it is, and then our staff would be the ones that help to reach out. And oftentimes we will have other members of the fair team help us. Keep in mind also that our court designated specialists that provide that coordination role, they also know the local, usually it's the officer that is working with the office quite, is familiar with the process. They know a lot of the kids, all that kind of stuff. So, but it's a team decision.
I tell you what, Rachel, I wouldn't mind some recommendations for some of those voices from a local fair team, even if they have to attend by Zoom to these meetings. I think that'd be worthwhile. If there are a couple of counties that have law enforcement reps that you can recommend, municipal, county, both. Yes, ma'am, Christina.
So could I ask a follow-up question to
Sure.
that? I mean, from my understanding, many of these fair teams would have potentially multiple school districts that they are working with, and so SROs are generally either at one school or maybe a couple of schools. But so how would you navigate that where the SRO would really be the one that would have insight into, multiple school districts or multiple schools within a large school district, that kind of thing?
Please.
So that has always been a challenge of the team, also with the school representatives, I would also say. And so there are two, sometimes possibly three school representatives that sit. And that is where it really comes down to the responsibility of those members and our staff to work collaboratively. If we need to bring in other representatives from those local schools, we do that. So it is not uncommon for us to have a situation where there's a school resource officer that doesn't officially sit on the team but is requested to come in for this particular group of kids. We do the same thing with the schools. And we've had some conversations and a little bit of complaints, I guess I should say, about the fact, well, the schools don't know what's going on or law enforcement doesn't know what's going on. But if they have someone that's participating, it's their role to go back and also share information. So it should be coming from a couple of different angles, from us, but also from them going back to their colleagues and making sure they're aware of what is going on with the youth that's being presented before that team.
Senator Webb.
Thank you. Along the lines of, the drug court team, let's say, use that as an analogy. We don't want to micromanage that, but I think, when you're looking at law enforcement selection for some of the reasons it's been cited, I mean, this is statutory. Somebody needs to show up, folks. That's to me, kind of grates on me. But law enforcement not following the law, if you will. But if we could do a uniform process where they might be selected, whether it's through our school resource officers, people who are know the subject matter probably better than a street patrol, and do a uniform across the board process for selection, whether it's a letter to the entities, and then you get feedback back, and then they could make a process from those that want to do it. Because I tend to believe there are law enforcement officers that want to do this, and some bring more to the table than others. So if we could look at something like that and make it sort of an invitation who wants to, and then the fair team could decide. And then secondly, I'm not a problem with the fair team, but the public defender's office, I've had a contract. They've got a lot to do. They're on every board team, and they should be. I've always advocated their presence, but I also, I've always wanted a member of the private bar on there for many different reasons, because member of the private bar kind of sometimes brings a little different perspective. We're still practicing juvenile law, people, and I think if you've got a lawyer, once again, interested in juvenile work, they're going to make an effort to be there. They're in the communities because they're in the courtrooms and doing this kind of law. So I think we're missing out in assisting the public defender's office. If you add a member, and I've threatened to file an amendment to the bill, but I hated to open up the Pandora's box through the years, because I like the concept. But if we're going to make any changes at all, I'd like to see that be one. I think it balances, if you will. You've got prosecutors and law enforcement, then you'd have a private bar and a public bar member. So I think that's pretty fair. But I think solicitation almost for the entities, and then volunteers who wants to do this, because we had that initial pushback with drug court teams. But now we've got officers that are in there and taking great pride in the work they're doing.
That's what this
and
was modeled after.
Contributing a great deal. So those are just some thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
And then Steve, you're next. I see your hand.
I'm sorry.
raised. You're good.
Okay. So, I've probably told this story too many times, but I'll say it again just in case somebody missed it. I was kind of drawn into this thing, this area of what we do through, there's so much problems in Jefferson County right now, and it was getting really close to home in my district. And so upon discovering, looking at what the problem is, Senate Bill 200, sir, was, heavily criticized. And the fair teams was a big part of that. And when I look at these attendants, law enforcement's not showing up, county attorneys are only half, and I understand why, but obviously it's not on their priority list to be on a fair team. And I received a lot of criticisms about fair teams. So my point is, maybe this committee can, for people like me that are catching up, maybe we can have some more focus on what the fair team does and how they do it, and maybe rebrand it. Because maybe, from what I hear on one side how great it is, on the others it's a big waste of time. Maybe we need a rebranding of fair teams, and maybe this body could explore that.
Well, I appreciate that, Representative, and I couldn't disagree with you more. With respect, I'm not going to support any changes to a multidisciplinary team modeled after the successful drug court program when three critical partners aren't there as much as they need to be there. And it's hard to hear any of the three groups criticize, particularly law enforcement. It's hard to hear them criticize it when they're not invested in it or they're not giving it a try in the first place. I don't want to be able to say that the lack of better attendance from members What if you could argue that the lack of better attendance from members has resulted in some of the failed diversion attempts? That a kid has fallen through the cracks because the right prosecutor, the right law enforcement officer who could have made a difference in that child's life wasn't in the room to talk about what they could do.
About getting rid of fair teams.
I know you're
maybe
not.
we need to look at it again.
If it doesn't change, I mean, you can rebrand it, call it whatever you want. Call it whatever you want. Rebrand it however you want to. But if the people that need to be in there talking about what's best for that kid aren't showing up to talk about what's best for the kid, then I don't know that it's serving its purpose at all. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to point out there's often when fair team is discussed, the analogy to drug court is made. But I do want to point out there are some very key differences between fair team and drug court. Drug court is a situation where it is already in court. It is essentially a diversionary program. They've taken responsibility. It is judicially led and convened. What fair team is not that. It is a process. It is something that is not judicially led or convened. And frankly, it's somewhat amorphous. If you read the statute, there's a list of people that are on it, and then there's kind of a catch-all for other agencies that might want to be involved as well. So it's a somewhat amorphous group, and I think there's some quarters lack of clarity or lack of understanding of what the purpose of what a fair team should be doing. So I just think there's, and I know AOC has done a lot of education on this, trying to get with stakeholders, make sure they understand. I'm not saying there's not a role for fair team at all. I think fair team can be a very important and useful tool. But I do think there are some very key differences between fair teams and drug courts that are that sometimes get lost. And I do think that leadership and judicial convening key is huge, both in attendance and effectiveness of a team like that.
I agree. Steve, I appreciate that. And those are some distinctions there. I don't know that they're material other than that judicial leadership role. You're right that the courts, the judges, the presiding court governs the drug court staff meeting. Having been on a drug court staff team myself when I was in the prosecutor's office, they run it. I think that probably would help the attendance. But I'll remind the members of this council who weren't here for the Senate Bill 200 drafting, the judges didn't want that. They didn't want to have that obligation or that role, and perhaps because, in part, as you've just mentioned, Steve, that it is pre-plea, pre-court process. But, of course, being pre-court process was part of the design. The one thing that it's very much identical to the drug court team, though, is in its most essential function, and that is having a multidisciplinary team talk about that case, how that individual, that human being is succeeding or how they're not succeeding, and what can be done as a group of services and agencies and organizations to help that person succeed. In drug court, that's certainly led by the judge. And in drug court, that's certainly post-plea. And there's some accountability there. But those two things can't exist very helpfully in a pre-court process for a juvenile that we are trying to keep out of court. That shouldn't stop the group of people and professionals around the table from being able to talk about what's best for that young person and what can help that person succeed and to troubleshoot why that person isn't succeeding. That's the objective. And again, I don't care what you call it. I really don't care. I don't care. As long as there's a group of people that are talking about what's best for that kid and they're meeting and they're trying to achieve that, I'm fine with it. Because I think that's the best approach to that. Anybody else have a? Yeah, Chairman.
For the AOC of the 40, I think you have 46% that were referred to court, so the diversion process was unsuccessful. Do you have any information on what makes up those cases typically? Is there something that's common amongst those cases that were, or complaints that were unsuccessful and ended up in court?
Definitely. We can get you the complete breakdown on what
I
those
appreciate
cases
that.
are.
Thank you.
May I also, Chairman?
Yeah, I'll let you wrap us up so we can move on to the next presenters.
Just to also mention that we want to get out to the council the guidelines that some of you have seen that that we developed early on in this process, so you can see the scope of what that looks like for the fair team guidelines. And I say that loosely because, again, it's still the team. And it could be an opportunity to look at how that may work. There are an additional 4 slots that are really the team's, decision in designating. And oftentimes they're picking those community people that directly provide or have access to the go-to people around supports and resources for kids. That could be an attorney, a private attorney. And then to just also say, we will draft a recommendation for you all to look at on how membership could possibly come onto the team and how that might formalize that. The only other thing I'll just drop is just to mention with our foster care review board members, that's actually an official appointment by the chief judge. And so that may be, the judge does not sit on those boards, but it is an appointment. And so if you wanted to if you think the official piece is something that's missing from this, that may be a way that people are participating because they feel like they have specifically been chosen. It could be a recommendation coming from the team to the judge, and we could formalize that process as an option, something to consider. That could be changed in statute. It could be changed in the guidelines if that's something that that we were requested to do. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and ask the folks from Youth Advocate Programs to come on up. And while they're coming up, I wanted to highlight, I got a helpful text message that House Bill 444 from this year's session, which I have pulled up, which the governor signed, gave personnel an extra $500,000 to finish it and set the November 1st deadline. So I don't know what the delay has been, but House Bill 444 answers the question. So at least it's now in statute to have it finished, though it looks to be non-codified language, but we'll see. So for reference, Youth Advocate Programs, Jamal Crawford and Ashley Randall. Welcome. Thanks for your patience for that tedious discussion before now.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting us and allowing us to present and talk on behalf of YAP to give an overview of the services that we provide. As Senator mentioned, I am Jamal Crawford. I've recently been promoted to Vice President of Youth Advocate Program, so I oversee the Midwest region. And then I'll have Ashley introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Ashley Randall. Oh, I'm not close enough either. I'm Ashley Randall. I am the Lexington, Kentucky Program Director out of Fayette County, and I'm happy to be here today. Thank you all for meeting with us.
All right, so first, to talk about our mission. So we are a high-impact social change nonprofit that provides community-based alternatives to youth incarceration, congregate placement, and neighborhood violence. So to kind of give a little bit about our U.S. footprint, we provide services to over 17,800 families annually. We provide services in over 100 urban, suburban, and rural communities throughout the nation. And we are currently in 34 states plus D.C. Actually in the process of going into 2 additional states, Oregon, as well as Missouri. We're going there. So the goal is YAP will be in 36 states plus D.C. by the end of this year. To talk a little bit about our population, as far as the kids that we serve the highest need young people and families who are most at risk of out-of-home placement. So working with kids who are coming out of secure settings such as youth prison, detention facilities, etc. Congregate care such as residential or group homes, residential treatment facilities, as well as working with kids who have violence within their communities. So back in 2020, as we all know that in 2020, that was the time that COVID occurred, but that did not stop YAP for doing the work out into the community. During that year, we actually provided services to over 16,000 families. And a little bit of the demographics in and around that, 61% of our participants are male, 39% of them were female. 63% of them were people of color. 55% of our staff as well are people of color. The staffing structure is 80% are part-time. So those are advocates that does the work out in the communities with the participants and with the families. And then 20% are our full-time staff. All right, so the scope of the services that we provide. So 32% of the services we provide are youth justice work. 25% is child welfare, and honestly, that has increased drastically over the past few years. Specifically, it's during COVID. We've noticed that there has been an increase in the utilization and need of child welfare services that YAP has been providing nationwide.
Give us an example of what that would be.
Child welfare services?
Yes, sir.
So we in Indiana, we provide services with child welfare. So those youth and families that are at risk of out-of-home placement from their maternal or paternal parents and families. And so we provide advocacy services to keep them in the home, to kind of ensure that they have that foundation structured to ensure that people are not coming in, taking the kids out of the home.
Does that mean an attorney?
Does
that mean counsel?
No.
Paying for an attorney or paying for, you said an advocate, and that's normally a court process to have someone removed from home. I was just curious what you're doing to contribute there or help there.
Helps.
We're eliminating the barriers. So we're stepping in and helping the families, whatever the barriers are that could put those children at risk of being taken from the home. So maybe that is fulfilling an unmet need, food, shelter,
How do y'all
helping
know
keep
which
the utilities
cases to
on.
intervene in?
So we get referrals from the child welfare system. So the Department of Child Services refers.
Thank you. Continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. We also provide behavioral health work as well throughout the nation. We don't specifically provide it in Kentucky. The services that we are specifically providing in Kentucky are youth justice, but YAP provides a plethora of services throughout the nation, from youth justice to child welfare to behavioral health. We do school-based services as well. So working in the schools with the kids, with the school personnel, to kind of, advocate, kind of ensuring that they are working to get their grades up or working to improve their school attendance, whatever those challenges and barriers are for our kids and families. We work with them to kind of ensure that they overcome those barriers, but also in conjunction and working with other members, school personnel, whoever wraps around that kid and family to ensure their success. We also provide anti-violence work. So we've been doing a lot of violence intervention work. That's really been growing throughout the nation. So we do provide that service. And then we also provide other services. So that includes working with kids that may have developmental disabilities. We also work with young adults as well. So our age range doesn't stop at 18. We also have programs that work with young adults that may be coming back out in the community from a detention or from a residential, and just helping them build their life skills so they can be successful adults out in the community. 100% of our work that we do is out in the community. So we are working in the homes with them. We're working in the schools with them. We're working in the communities with them, and we are about meeting them where they are. So I want to go and talk about our core principles, and this is what drives YAP to do the work that we do out in the community. The first core principle I want to talk about is our individualized service planning. So when we receive referrals, so currently we are contracted with Kentucky Department of Juvenile Justice. So we can receive referrals from anywhere from the diversion side up into kids who are committed or probated to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So any of those departments, so CDWs, AOCs, Fair Team, DYS, DJJ, all of those entities we have a collaboration and partnership with. And if there are any referrals that they feel that would benefit our services, they can send us the referral for us to initiate contact. So once we receive that referral, we reach out to the participants and the families within 24 to 48 hours of receiving that referral to schedule an intake. Our goal is to have that intake scheduled and conducted within 72 hours. Realistically, we know that sometimes there may be barriers such as schedules with the parents working, things like that. So realistically, we try to make sure that we get that intake conducted within the first week. During that intake, our program director is the one that's meeting with that parent, meeting with that participant, utilizing our holistic assessment tools to kind of understand the strengths, the needs, and the interests of the families and the kids in order to begin identifying goals to work on with them. And then there are consent forms that they have to sign stating that we can provide that service. So after that occurs, the program director will assign an advocate that does advocate kid matching. So the advocate that we feel that would work best with that kid and that family, we identify them to begin providing the services. During that first 30 to 45 days, the kid is working on building that rapport, building that relationship with the advocate and vice versa. In the process, the advocate is also identifying those formal and informal supports that can wrap around the kid and the family throughout the time they are in the program, as well as hopefully when the kid gets discharged. Because our kids are in the program for an average of 6 months. So we want to be able to set them, work with them to ensure they are successful, but also ensure that there are resources put in place for them after they get discharged. So the advocate is always working on establishing those community connections, those community resources throughout the time the kid and the family is in the program and getting discharged. So as they're building that relationship, building that rapport, identifying the wraparound supports, we then have a CFTM, our child family team meeting, within the first 30 to 45 days. Bringing all those wraparound supports together to kind of identify what are the things that are going well, because we are a strength-based organization. So we want to identify what the strengths are of the kid and the parents. But in addition to that, we know that they were referred to us because they had challenges. So we want to address those challenges as well. And then as a family team, we want to come up with interventions to work on with that kid and that family throughout the time to ensure that they achieve the goal that's in place. And an example of a goal that I would give is, say if there's a kid that is having some struggles getting enrolled into school, for example, they're not enrolled in school. So say we would need the parent, the advocate, the kid, school personnel, Board of Education to all work together to ensure we're making the steps to change for that kid to meet the goal. So that's setting them up with the meeting with the Board of Education to get them to signed up for school. If that's getting supplies for them to ensure that when school starts that they are ready to get it started. Ensure that they have their school uniform. Whatever the steps that we need to take to ensure that to get them enrolled and started in school, that's what we will work on together. So once we establish those goals, we will then create what we call the individualized service plan. And so the director and the advocate will work together weekly to kind of go over whatever goals are put in place and ensure that we are on track to meet those goals throughout the time that the kid and families in the program. Anything to add to that? All right. So our next one is focused on strengths. As I mentioned earlier, we are a strength-based organization. So we want to identify the strengths in our kids. And we feel that identifying the strengths in the kids will make them be more willing not only to buy into the services that we are providing, but to also develop some type of social skills, some type of realization as far as identifying and understanding what they are good at doing. Because oftentimes our kids may not know their strengths. Oftentimes they may know it, but they may not recognize what it is. So we work with them to kind of identify and build upon their strengths. We have partnership with parents. So we feel that it is imperative and important that our parents have a voice, choice, and access in the services that are being provided to the kids throughout the time they're in the program. We feel that if the parent doesn't feed in or buy into what we're providing, it makes it more challenging for us to ensure that we're providing the quality of services to our kids throughout the time they're in the program. So ensuring that they get a say-so in what's going on, ensuring that we are communicating with them the services that we are providing, ensuring that we're looping them in everything that is going on with their child, we feel that is very imperative in the success of our kids. We do culture and linguistic competence. So to kind of touch base a little bit about that, we do zip code recruitment. So we identify advocates in these communities where our kids and our families live because, one, we want them to be able to navigate through those communities, know where the safety issues and safety factors are, being able to understand where things are located at, as well as being able to identify resources that can be supportive and helpful to our kids and parents, because that's what our end goal is. We do the do for, do with, and cheer on. So when doing for, doing with, and cheering on, we are not only kind of engaging and getting those resources put in place, we are setting them up so they can also identify their resources that they can do in addition to whatever we put in place for their continued success after they get discharged. We do the teamwork, as I mentioned earlier. We do a wraparound support. So informal and formal supports come together to work with that kid and family to ensure their success. Community-based care, 100% of the work that we do is in the community. We have unconditional caring, so we are no eject, no reject organization. So any of the referrals that are sent to us by our referring authorities, we will work with those kids and with those families, even if they are the most challenging. And in fact, that's kind of our specialty. As my boss man Dave describes it, we like to work with those superstars. So those kids in those communities that we identify, yeah, he or she could use the help. Those are the kids that we like to work with. Being able to give back. So as I stated before, it's the do for, do with, and cheer on that we do with the kids. But not only are we instilling all of those resources into these kids, we want these kids and families to be able to give back to their communities. So if it's such as going to the park and picking up trash, or if it's going to feed the homeless, whatever the case may be, we want to ensure that they are doing something to give back within their communities. And then corporate and clinical integrity, we are honest. And we take, fraud very seriously. Oftentimes we may have staff that state that they are engaging with our kids and families, and that may not be the case. So we have different systems set up to ensure that the quality of services are being provided. We have a monitoring department that reaches out to our kids and families every month to ensure services are being provided, and that it's accurate services being provided, as well as our program director. The program director is always reaching out to the kids and families just to kind of ensure things are going well, because we're all about that quality assurance, but just making sure that we're doing the right thing. So our YAP RAP model, as I stated earlier, we match individual and families to the advocates who serve as catalysts for the change, as well as connectors to the community. And I have this graph I wish I could show y'all, but it has the graph has the youth and the family in the middle, and then it has school, work, community, and home all wrapped around this kid and family to ensure their success. All right, so as I mentioned earlier about the do for, do with, and do on, we are time-limited, credible, trusted advocates. So continually assessing their needed level of support. So as we're taking the path of their success, ensuring that we're doing that do for, do with, and cheering on. To elaborate a little bit more on the catalyst for change, the purpose of that is to help our participants and families be open and accelerate the pace of growth and change, to help to build skills and unlock potential. So we do things such as expecting, engaging, practicing, educating, coaching, modeling, exposing, and encouraging. And then, of course, the connector to the community. We want to work on getting these kids connected to different community resources, and not just the kids, then the families as well. Because YAP doesn't just work with the families. With the kid. We also provide services to the family. And an example is if there is a parent that may not have transportation and can't go to the grocery store, they may have a court appointment, or they may have a medical appointment. The advocates can provide their transportation and their support to ensure that they are getting to those places. And so, we just want to make sure that we're wrapping around and ensuring that everyone is as successful as possible. And so when we're connecting them to the communities, we're connecting them to things such as civic organizations, libraries, religious groups, parks and recreations, different businesses, social services, schools, etc. All right, so our YAP program team here in Kentucky consists of, we are in the process of actually hiring a state director. As you all may or may not know, we have just went statewide as of July 1. We started in Lexington and Louisville, Jefferson and Fayette, and we were able to expand into McCracken, Hardin County, Warren County, and Christian County, with conversation about starting in Davis County and then going up into the northern counties up in, I think it's Benton County as well, to provide those statewide services. So with us going statewide, we have a state director that we're going to hire and identify that's going to have that support and ensure that our programs are successful, as well as ensuring that the connection and the communication and the relationship with our referring authorities continue to go well. Our program directors work in each one of the programs within our counties. They provide the oversight to the program and kind of ensure that The advocates receive the quality supervision, training, and provided the quality of services to the parents and the kids that are referred to our programs. The assistant director, of course, assists the program director in ensuring things are being taken care of, and that is also in coordination with our program coordinator that does work as well out in the community. We have an administrative manager that we call them the face of the office. They're the ones that kind of ensure compliance with our operations and with our contractual obligations, and just kind of ensure that the office is in good standing. And then the people who do the work, the ones that are feet on the ground running, are our advocates. Those are, we feel, the most important role because they are the ones out here in the communities with our kids and families, engaging with them. So as far as who we hire as advocates, they can have anywhere from a GED to a PhD. They work on connecting the kids and the families to local supports. They will implement the individualized service plan that is created for them. They work on building whatever skills they have to maximize them. As I stated earlier, we do community work, so working in the home, school, and communities. We meet with them when needed, time dosage. So currently our contract states that we are providing an average of 10 hours per week to our DJJ youth. So we're seeing them an average of 3 to 4 times per week. And with our diversion youth, it's averaging around 7.5 hours a week, but we're still seeing them as well about 3 to 4 days a week. Available 24/7. That's a good one. We are on call and available to our kids and to our families 24/7. We know that oftentimes situations happen and the parents might easily refer to calling the police. Now, we understand that if it's of imminent danger to themselves or to others, police need to be notified. But if it is something that can be de-escalated without police involvement, YAP wants to be a part of that because one of our goals is keeping these kids in the home. So if we are a part of assessing and a part of working and mediating the situation and creating a safety plan to kind of ensure that if this situation happens again, then this is plan A that you go to. If plan A doesn't work, here's plan B that you can go to. So we're trying to teach them to be self-sufficient and be able to handle crisis situations within themselves, within their homes.
If I can ask a question about your advocates.
Yes.
What are the qualifications or any credentials for those advocates, if they have any? Do you use or rely exclusively on folks with lived experience, or are you what are you looking for when you hire the advocates?
So we consider lived experience, professional experience, and educational experience together. A lot of the best advocates are those that have overcome some challenges in their life. And so we consider all of that. The minimum requirement as far as education is the GED or the high school diploma. But once we bring staff on board, we complete basic advocacy training. We also train all of our staff in crisis management and de-escalation skills, as well as safety planning, and then various curriculum that we implement, such as anger management, life skills, things like that. Our staff are trained internally on all of those things, as well as trauma-informed care and anything else that may be necessary. We have trainings extending from everything from working with youth with autism or other developmental disabilities on to just, truancy matters or things within the home. Strengthening families is a curriculum that we have that is exactly what it sounds like, just getting to the root of what's going on, because we know we can work with these kids all day long, but if we're not changing what's happening in the home, the longevity of their success isn't going to be as great.
What's the ratio of your advocates to the children that you're serving? How many children per advocate do you hope to have?
It really varies because our staff can be part-time, or most of our staff are part-time. And so some advocates have just one youth that they work with, and some have up to about 6.
Okay.
So it really just depends.
Yeah, Rachel.
First, I have to say, Ashley, I know of you. It's nice to actually see you. The Fayette County judges love you and speak very highly of you. So it's good to have you here. My question is a little bit on the business side of things. I know that you all have the contracts through the Department of Juvenile Justice here in Kentucky. Is the model always to where it's a contractual relationship with another entity, or is there nonprofit set up? Like, for example, when you mentioned the emerging adult, Chairman, just to put this little plug in. I was curious about that, but I was curious of it from the adult side of things, obviously, and how that then would you even do a referral if you were set up through a contractual basis. So I guess I was curious, are there models that operate more in that sort of where you come to, for example, Frankfurt and set up an office and have clients come in and out, but you're not necessarily a contractual, only there because of the contract with an agency?
Yes, so we have a program in Chicago. They call their CPS, Chicago Public Schools. And so we have a partnership with the Chicago Public Schools. So we have a summer works program that we are currently doing there. And so they will send us about 200 referrals. And these are voluntary. So we, as the YAP workers, are responsible for going out into the communities and recruiting those referrals. So it's not a situation as to where they are court ordered or they are designated to provide a service because of the referring authority sending it to them. So we have to utilize our model, utilize our best practices, kind of to get them to buy into the services, get them to volunteering for us to provide services to them. And it's really off of the relationship and the rapport that we build with them. We utilize that a lot to kind of get that engagement. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a situation where they receive the referral, you have to work with us in order to do so. We have had situations where we've went out into the communities and told them about our program and asked them to volunteer to be a part of the program to kind of work with them on whatever issues and challenges they have.
Yes, ma'am.
But the school pays for that. They give you you have a contract with the school.
Yes.
So you're never independent where you're trying to get your own money to stay like a nonprofit would operate, like where you're trying to keep your own business, your own clientele, and your own.
Yeah, we are a nonprofit. Yes,
I mean, your own. So I guess I should say in the sense of, I'm saying this wrong, I know. In the sense of you have an office set up and you have clients that come to you and you don't charge them a fee, but you have monies coming in from other places. It's always through a contract with some entity that you guys come in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry for
Yes.
my confusion.
No problem.
You can continue.
All right. I'm almost finished. All right. So our core components. So as I mentioned earlier, our dosage of hours is anywhere between 7 to 10 hours per week. However, we have a range of hours, but anywhere between 7 to 25. And the way that we determine that is just depending on the complexity of the case. Every case that we receive is individualized based off of their needs, their strengths, and their interests. So if there is a higher need for a kid more than another kid, then the dosage of services or hours may be a little higher based off of the needs. So we kind of assess that. The program director is the one that assesses when they do that initial intake to determine, okay, this kid may benefit from 10 hours a week versus, okay, this kid may benefit from 20 hours a week because they may have siblings that need support. They may have parents that are struggling with getting to the store, getting their needs met. So there may be a need for more services to ensure that they are successful. As I stated earlier, the contact is an average of 3 to 4 days a week. The length of stay is an average of 6 months. And that's not to say that if a kid does well and, in 4 months and they can come off of probation or whatever the stipulation is to get off out of the YAP services, that can happen. But there's also been cases on the other end where maybe they're at the 6 months and they're not doing so well and they would benefit from some continued services and YAP will stay with them. So we're not going to be like, it's 6 months, even though he or she's not doing well, we're going to go ahead and discharge them. We always communicate with our referring authorities. And if there's a need for that continued service and support, we are always going to be willing to stay and provide that to them. The services at time most needed and are convenient to the families from within their homes and the communities. As I talked about earlier, the transportation is a big one, as well as the 24/7 crisis support. We've received some calls at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and have been there to deal with situations. There was a situation that Ashley had to deal with some months back where she actually stayed overnight at an office to support a kid that was having some transitions, the entire night. And so we like to not only meet the kids where they're at, but we want to let these kids know that we do support them, that we are here for them, even though they may have hiccups, even at the highs and the lows. Flex funding. I love talking about this. YAP has, yes.
I'm going to ask you to try to speed up just a little
Sorry.
bit. That's
Okay.
all right.
Yes, sir. Flex funding. This is in situations where, say, if there's a family that is facing eviction, or there's a family whose water is at risk of getting cut off, or their electricity is cut off, or they need groceries, or, just those different type of situations where they need assistance. Either A, we are going to look in community resources to provide that support, or YAP will provide that support themselves. But not only do that, we will provide a safety plan to kind of assure, okay, we pay for your rents and, from facing eviction. What's the plan to ensure that this isn't the case in 2 months? What's the plan to ensure that 2 months later your electric bill is not at risk of getting cut off? So we want to provide that assistance and support, but we also want to ensure that they are set up so this is not an issue going forward. So I want to just talk about real quick about our outcomes, and I'm going to allow Ashley to discuss this because I know one of the things that wanted to be discussed was our diversion and the programs that we did around diversion. So Lexington had an OJJDP contract, Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, from 2018 to 2021. So we worked with the FAIR team, CDWs, with DYS during this 3-year term. And I want Ashley to kind of elaborate on how that looked as far as outcomes.
So in 2019, we served 28 youth. 23 were male, 5 were female. 16 of them were African American, 5 Caucasian, 3 Hispanic, and 4 biracial. Out of the 28 youth that we served, 24 were successful, meaning that they didn't, further penetrate the juvenile justice system during their time with us or post-discharge, and 4 were unsuccessful. During 2020, we had 24 participants. Again, things changed. With COVID, it was a little bit more difficult to get families to engage. We served 18 male, 6 female, 12 African American, 5 Caucasian, 3 Hispanic, and 4 biracial youth. Out of the 24 youth, 22 were successful. Things were going really well, and we're coming out on the other side of COVID. So in 2021, we actually served 44 youth in Fayette County, 29 male, 15 female. 14 of those were African American, 9 Caucasian, 11 Hispanic, and 10 biracial. And out of those 44, we had 34 that were successful, 10 that were unsuccessful. So over the course of those 3 years, our overall data reflected that 85% of the youth that we served were successful and did not reoffend post-discharge from receiving our services, which is a really great success rate for us, especially, coming through COVID. We've continued to see a great increase from 2021 till current in 2023. 86% of our youth have been living safely in their communities at the time of their discharge from our program. 26% of families had a decrease in open child protective services case between entry and discharge. 83% were regularly attending school or had graduated with their diploma or their GED. And 97% of the youth were not convicted or adjudicated of any new offenses while in the program. So we've seen great outcomes. We know that the work that we're doing works, just giving these kids an alternative so that they can see a different way and not continue to go that path.
Does anyone have any questions for us?
Yeah, Representative Herron.
Thank you all for this presentation. I'm very familiar with the app. I believe I was doing some work with the CDW office when the program first came here in Kentucky. I do just have 2 follow-up questions. When you're talking about young people not the success rate, how long do you all look at them? So after they leave your program, what is that time period that you're measuring the success rate from?
Yes, so we like to follow up to a year after they get discharged. We don't only measure the success while they're in the program. We like to ensure that the tools and resources that we put in place for them shows their continued success up to a year after they get discharged. So we have a monitoring department that reaches out to them 3 months, 6 months, and a year post-discharge to kind of ensure that things are going well, that the resources that they put in place are successful, that they haven't further penetrated in the justice system, things like that. So we do document that and tally that up as our outcomes as well.
Thank you. And the other question is more of just an ask, really. Can we get a copy of whatever presentation that you all were looking at And then I would be interested in seeing the data from Jefferson County, just to see how we can. I really believe in this program, and so I would like to see the data from Jefferson County to ensure that see how we can support those efforts and make sure that you all have what you need to support those young people there.
Yes, I will definitely make sure to get that out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Christina.
This sounds like a great program, so thank you for sharing. A lot of what I heard sounds very similar to some of the efforts that our Family Resource and Youth Service Centers provide. And so can you talk a little bit about how you might interface with those entities in schools to either identify youth that might need some additional support, like on a more intensive level that you provide, or how do you interface with the FRISC coordinators?
Well, we're definitely collaborative, and we're inviting those partners to the table when we have those child and family team meetings. It's important that we're not duplicating efforts, right? And then also not playing a game of who's on first. So we definitely invite them to those conversations, keep them informed. We're very active in our youth's education. So we attend their ARC meetings if they have them, even just conferences at school, constant communication with the school staff. And also some of our programming we've had school-based. So we did a school-based program in Fayette County for 1 year, and we're working to get one in Davis County. And so with that, we were able to provide services at the school level for the youth that were not yet court involved, but maybe were at risk. So we attended their meetings, and they would present kind of like a school fair team, I guess. They would present us with, kind of their highest needs kids and see if they would be a good fit for the program. We would provide the services at the school level as a prevention intervention. And so those youth were identified by the school resource team that we could go in and help work collaboratively. Also, they will reach out to us. So there's only so much that they can do throughout the school day. So if they have a youth or a family that they feel like needs someone to go to the home, check in and see what's going on, they'll plug us in to be able to do that. Or I've even had, school personnel reach out to me and say, hey, Johnny's had a really bad day. Can you follow up on the home front and in the community and after hours, because they're limited on what they can do. So we work collaboratively to make sure that we're meeting those needs no matter what time of day or night.
All right. Thank you all. Anybody have any other questions? Yeah, Damon, last one.
Just real quickly, you talked about I guess a decision has been made that you'll go statewide. I see on the website that you have 6 offices right now. Davis is not listed, so I guess that's a 7th that's in process that you're talking about. Is your vision of a statewide system being that you will gradually open new offices in smaller locations, because this is essentially the 6 largest counties in Kentucky, or that you'll branch out from these, like McCracken County, that you'll go into Livingston County and Ballard County? Can you real quickly, what's the vision for going from where you are to a true statewide office?
It is definitely the latter part. So, we'll identify our program offices. We currently, we have 6 program offices currently. We're going into Davis County, and then we're going into one of the northern counties in Benton County area. But there's surrounding counties in.
I assume you mean Boone.
Is it Kenton? Is it Kenton?
Kenton.
I knew I was saying it wrong. Kenton County.
What's a
Thank you.
merger? Boone and Kenton merger. Yeah.
Now listen, we don't need that kind of controversy in this committee.
So like in Fayette County, for example, there's quite a few counties surrounding there. So we have the ability to work in those surrounding counties, but our hub would be Fayette County. The same thing will apply for Kenton County up in northern. We'll have a location there, but I know there's surrounding counties there that we can also provide services to. And so it's just kind of identifying those hubs, but we have the potential to work in several different counties that are surrounding those. You're welcome.
Thank you all so much. I have one request. Send us that slide presentation, if it's all right with you, and we
Yes,
can
sir.
distribute it to the members.
I'll send it to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Youth Build Louisville, Cal Carey. Good afternoon. You have the floor, Mr. Carey. If you is the green light on?
Do I need to? Okay.
There we go.
First of all, on behalf of a couple of our young people, Miss Leandra and Daquan, he wants us to share thanks to Senator Westerfield and Representative Bratcher for, one, listening to them, and two, incorporating what was heard into the bill. This is a part of the work that we do at Youth Build Louisville. We are championing our young adults to be great citizens so they can build sustainable communities.
I want to say that thanks should also be extended to my colleague, Senator Carroll, here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who just stepped out. But he was also instrumental in making sure their language made it into that bill.
Yes, that and that is a large part of the work that we do at Youth Build Louisville. We have been operating in Smoketown for 20 years, 22 years now, providing young people with career ladders, which are high school diplomas, certifications in construction, CNA, and right now, property maintenance. We are also serving young people through our career violence component, which is where we have violence interrupters and outreach workers working directly in the Smoketown neighborhood to address this, pandemic with gun violence in our city, which has proven to be successful, meeting families where they are, identifying individuals that need services, and working with them, whether they're court involved or not, on both ends, the prevention and bringing down recidivism by engaging these young people, by providing resources that remove some of the barriers that cause perpetuation of the activity, which results in shootings. We're also serving young people from age 13 to 18 years of age with our teen empowerment, which is where they identify neighborhood issues and work to develop solutions and provide resources to address those. Currently, they are working on a project to provide homeless individuals with care packages and food and other resources, as well as working with individuals and helping them find housing resources. We serve at Youth Build have a variety of programs designed to meet the needs of young people and partner with JCPS Friskies, serving the city at large. So while we're located in Smoketown, we entertain young people or provide these services to young people from all over Jefferson County. So this means that we are serving young people from every neighborhood and addressing and dealing with those issues on a day-to-day basis, where we were successful in graduating this year alone, almost 50 young people receiving certifications in high school diplomas. We tried to disseminate information with our website directly to you guys today. I don't know if she was able to pass our leaflets around containing links to additional information. So our care violence model is what I was briefly touching on with the violence interrupters as well as the outreach workers. Every time we provide a young person engaged in that program with a resource or an opportunity, that brings down their risk level. So risk level is key to look at in terms of young people becoming successful and families getting what they need. Oftentimes, those things are linked in terms of what we're seeing in a lot of the other data and numbers, which, I want to just be honest that those numbers are stark in terms of the numbers of shootings and homicides that we've been experiencing in Jefferson County. This work, what Youth Build is doing as a comprehensive youth service organization. And when I say that, basically, we're trying to become a one-stop shop to meet the needs of the area young people, which is providing a plethora of program options, because one size does not necessarily always fit all, if that makes any sense to you guys. So we have been doing this work intensively through the pandemic and a lot of other things. We're learning and we're also growing. So I say that to say that we are expanding our programming to try to meet the needs as young people come in search for particular resources. Don't want to belabor or make this longer than it has to be. If anybody has any questions specifically about our program, would be extremely helpful right now.
How many participants do you have? How many kids are you all serving? You graduated 10 the last time, not 10, but 50 you said?
Yes.
But how many are you taking care of at any
so,
given time?
So back to the variety of programming, we are actually taking care of almost 300 young people at one time through the variety of our programming, from the Cure Violence to the Teen Empowerment to the core program of Youth Build, where we provide the certifications, high school diplomas. So anywhere between 250 and 300 people at a time. So our programming is not just geared toward one specific age group. Is 18 to 24 in the traditional programming, 13 to 18 in the Teen Empowerment program.
Which group is bigger by chance?
The Teen Empowerment and the Cure Violence is bigger. However, they cross and intersect, because some of our young people are 18 and are eligible for the traditional programming. And then the community at large, which is a 9 square block radius that we're directly responsible for, there's over 1,600 young people in that community that we serve. But when I'm speaking about the 300, I'm talking about who are actually or who have received services.
Main referral sources for Youth Build?
Our main referral sources is from word of mouth, website, family resource centers, CSYA, Unite Us. Those platforms provide us the court system, where we would, in direct relationship to our efforts with recidivism, we provide legal fund assistance where we would help them obtain legal counsel. I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
You're fine.
So that's how those particular pieces work. So remind me of the question. I'm sorry.
Just your referral sources.
So we get referral sources from the courts. I'm sorry, probation, parole. So all youth service organizations send us referrals for different resources.
Commissioner?
Thank you. So I come from the behavioral health space and interested in insights in prevention for substance use disorder, getting folks to harm reduction services early in their lives. Insights, what are you seeing in trends or any asks that you have for support in that space?
My ask for that, and it's probably maybe a little controversial, but I think serving a predominantly African American population, there is a lot of stigma around receiving mental health services. I think having clinicians that look more like the population that needs the services. I also believe that it needs to start out on group services and move into individual services. Not a lot of mental health professionals are really looking at doing group services and breaking it down from the macro to the micro in terms of getting past the stigma of receiving mental health services, along with, to be quite honest, a lot of the young people that we've worked with have had mental health services but didn't have good experiences with mental health service providers. Us mainly in Jefferson County having one, maybe two major mental health doing the lion's share. So what I would also say is more mental health services, more paths for independent mental health service providers would be great to support that. You're welcome.
Any other questions? That's helpful to know, Commissioner. I'm glad you asked that question. I can't say that I know the stats on I don't even know from an education standpoint whether or not there are enough minority students in the pipeline for those positions. I almost wish that our joint meeting last month could have heard that same testimony. Yeah, Christina.
So I can say no. there's not enough of any mental. There's not enough mental health providers. Period. And so obviously there would also not be enough providers of color.
Right.
But just kind of to piggyback off of that question, one of our staff members was recently on a team with other folks from behavioral health earlier this week at a national suicide prevention summit, particularly focused on Black youth. And so I'm very curious because I've also seen some pretty startling numbers around suicide among Black male youth in particular. And so I wondered if you have any comments on that specific aspect in addition to the substance use question that was answered there.
Well, as it relates to Black youth, suicide has most definitely been on the rise. And I guess from a traditional sense, when you look at suicide, but I think a lot of the behavior associated with what's going on with this gun violence could also be, if you're homicidal, you might be suicidal. If that makes any sense to you. So I would have to say yes, the trend is going up for a lot of different reasons. One driving it is a lot of the trauma and lack of youth programming in a lot of the neighborhoods where we are experiencing a lot of these things. Traditionally, there were a lot of youth service opportunities for young people. And those things steadily decreased from maybe year 2000 to present. We are seeing a reemergence of some youth services, but probably not a lot hopefully it'll make an impact and kind of decrease that as young people get things to do to preoccupy their mind and kind of deal with a lot of what's happening on the social media end of things. Is really, I think, and a lot of professionals are saying that's what's driving it, and that's what's has been hard to get in front of. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Mr. Carey, thank you for your time and for your patience. I'm sorry you were there at the end.
No problem. I apologize for these alerts that I've been getting.
Yes, sir. The next meeting is August 25th, Friday, August 25th at 11 a.m. Again, Commissioner, if you could have your folks, just a written report is sufficient. I don't anticipate the need to have anybody testify. Rachel, look forward to the additional information you're going to have in the AOC's report. Our three folks, I'll reach out to Sheriff Ward, and we'll invite, Senator Carroll's not here, but he had to depart, but we'll make sure law enforcement associations are invited if they wish to be here. Have I forgotten anything? I think that's it.